Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Now, Dom Joly has spent most of his career highlighting life's absurdities and making us laugh out loud in the process. From his groundbreaking Channel 4 sketch show, Trigger Happy TV, through a long and varied career across screen, stage, as a travel writer, he's made it his business to seek out the most surreal situations and people that our planet has to offer.
Like this one.
Now, if that's meant making himself look ridiculous in the process, then he hasn't shied away. I give you the man who once crawled across a zebra crossing dressed as a giant orange land snail. For his brilliant new book, The Conspiracy Theorist, he's jumped headfirst down a series of international rabbit holes, and yes, in this case, that is a metaphor. His mission, to immerse himself in the bizarre beliefs gaining traction as alternative worldviews. Some are niche, others having a genuine impact on international politics and the world around us. The locations, people, and organizations that Dom encounters on the way are equal parts funny, bonkers, and downright petrifying, which I hope sets the tone for the next 45 minutes. At the end of which there will be time for questions and then a book signing over at the Stanfords stand just over there. Dom Joly, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, thank you very much.
Now, not many stands around here are offering conspiracy tours, at least not on the face of it. Are they missing a trick?
Well, they are a little bit. I was looking around thinking, is there anyone doing sort of conspiracy? Because my first travel book was called The Dark Tourist, then stolen by Netflix, but we won't get into that. And I did think that there was a real niche for kind of dark tourism and actually there are a couple of companies, I think Black Tomato and various people that do that kind of stuff. But no, as far as I know, no one does conspiracy tours. Although if you go to the States, there are all sorts of companies doing UFO tours, and there's a company that does. I wrote a book going after Bigfoot and Yeti and stuff like that, although it was a problem, because if I'd ever discovered them, no one would have believed me, so it would have been a nightmare. But there are Bigfoot tours you can do as well.
Well, what I like about the book is it's clear that, we'll come on to America in a minute, and North America, but it's clear you don't have to go that far to find some decent conspiracies. And we'll start at the beginning of the book. Your first destination was Finland. Why Finland?
So there's this amazing diagram done by someone online, which kind of shows the different stages of conspiracies. And it starts with, it's a pyramid, so it's got a thick base, and it's got with a lot of conspiracies that might have happened or are not, could be true. And then it just it gradually just gets more and more insane to the absolute loony ones at the top. And so I took that as my basis for the book, and I kind of just window-picked just a lot of them and just thought, which one would I do? And the first one I saw, which was about halfway up, and I think it should be slightly further up, it just said Finland does not exist. And I just thought that was such a great concept. And to go into the actual conspiracy would take too long, but essentially it's that in 1917, Japan and Russia conspired to make up a place called Finland, where they think, or where supposedly is just sea, so that they could have exclusive fishing rights. And basically the fish would then be taken to Japan on the Trans-Siberian Express. So, I mean, clearly bollocks, frankly. But I did think it was really interesting, because one of the things about conspiracies is it's very difficult to argue with a conspiracist, because it's their obsession, it's their life, they have all the facts and figures. I don't have those facts and figures. I've just got sort of common sense and what I think is a sense of right and wrong. And it seems to me very clear that Finland did exist. But if you believe the conspiracy, when you fly to Finland, you're not landing in Finland. You're landing either somewhere in Russia or in Sweden, and the people claiming to be Finns are actors. I don't know if there are any Finns here. Are there Finns? Are you aware of this? Do you know about this conspiracy? You don't know that you don't exist. Okay. I'm not sure you are Finns. You've been placed here, you see. But so anyway, I went to Finland to prove that it existed, and I landed in Helsinki. And I tried to put myself in a conspiracist mindset. And so I land, and it says, "Welcome to Helsinki." The gentleman stamps my passport, and I say, "Where am I?" And he looks at me a little bit puzzled, and he says, "You're in Finland." I go, "But am I?" And he said, "Well, yeah, you are." And I said, "But can you prove it?" And he was like, "No, not really." And then he said, "But if you look on your phone, like, it'll show you on the map you're in Finland." I go, "Yeah, but who owns the map?" And then you realize it's Bill Gates, and if you start going down that rabbit hole, you can never win. But I think Finland exists. I believe you are. Okay, yeah.
And then once you've got through the airport,
yeah,
seems to me there's a few little things you do to try and find a conspiracist. One of the things I noticed was obviously you talk to people.
Yeah.
And you seem to, Uber drivers seem to be quite a kind of an easy hit to start with.
I'll tell you what, if I did any of my travel books that I've done, actually my very first ones, Uber didn't exist, but Uber is absolutely the best way to get the best stories and get the lowdown on anywhere you go, because by the nature of Uber, all Uber drivers are not really drivers. They're all something else who are just doing Uber for a bit. So whenever, and they're normally students or they're resting actors. They're always interesting. So when I landed in Colorado, for instance, and I went to Denver International Airport, which is an absolute ground zero of conspiracy theorists. People think it's a panic room for the Illuminati. They think there's millions of tunnels underneath, and that's where they're all going to come and hide when the rapture comes. But weirdly, like all these conspiracies, they kind of want to show off, because apparently one of the signs that it's the panic room for the Illuminati is if you look at Denver Airport from the air, according to conspiracy theorists, the runways are shaped in the shape of a swastika, which I have looked, it's pretty tenuous. But also, if you were setting up a panic room for the Illuminati, why would you want everyone to know? There's not a lot of logic in some of that stuff. But yes, so the first person I talked to was an Uber driver taking me into Colorado, and he just had all the gen on it. So yeah, they're brilliant. They're very good sources of information.
Well, seeing as we've landed in America, let's talk a bit about the States and about North America more generally. Why is it that conspiracy theories seem to have taken such a hold there? Is it just because we can understand because it's our, these are our closest neighbours?
No.
Culturally? Why is it that America is so susceptible?
It's a really good question, and actually, everyone knows. We've all watched Louis Theroux. Like any sort of travel writing, vaguely amusing travel writer or documentarist, John Ronson, the first thing you do, you go on a big road trip through America and just meet the nutters. I'm sorry to use that expression, but it is just full of them. And really, if you're doing a book on conspiracies, America is absolute ground zero for it. It's full of it. And I was wondering why for ages. And I think my explanation for it is America was born a rebel nation. America was born fighting the king, fighting us Brits, fighting the government. There's a real mistrust of the sort of federal government. Yep. There's a mistrust of power, which comes there's something in their DNA, which is just, they're rebels that have come from other countries, formed their own country, and they don't want to trust anyone in power. And weirdly, that seems to have dripped a little bit into, the sort of Michael Govian, the fear of experts, the fear of intellectuals even. There's a real kind of amateurism in America, whereby they refuse to trust anyone that appears to be trustworthy. It's a very odd thing, but it makes for great entertainment.
Do you think there's
hence Donald Trump, to be honest.
Do you think there's also a relationship with America's other obsession, which is making money? It struck me reading the book that in certain respects, people realise there's money to be made from conspiracies.
So conspiracies definitely do make money, and a great example of that, I looked at UFOs, which I have to say, of all the conspiracies I looked at, there's probably more truth. There's more something going on in UFOs. It's not completely ridiculous, although I do wonder why, if aliens are visiting our country and America so often, they just consistently anally probe toothless rednecks and don't just land outside the United Nations and just speak to us. But put that to one side. I didn't go to Area 51, which is the classic place to go for UFOs, because I kind of get what Area 51 is. It clearly is an American US Air Force secret base. They didn't really want people spying on them, and if people thought that the weird things flying around were UFOs, then that's much better than having to give away their secrets. I got that. But there's a town called Roswell in New Mexico, which is famous for supposedly a UFO crashed in 1947. You might have seen some famous alien autopsy film, which is actually a hoax. It was made by someone 30 years later. But nevertheless, Roswell has become Disneyland for ufologists. And Roswell, honestly, is a place you just don't need to visit. It's a one-horse town. You really you would just drive straight through if it wasn't for the UFO thing. But they have gone to town with it. The McDonald's in town is a massive chrome, rather beautiful spaceship. Dunkin' Donuts is a 30-foot alien holding a donut up. There's a center, even the streetlights are made to look like alien heads. There's a center for research, there's a museum, all quite disappointing, but it is brilliant for that. So that town exists entirely on UFO tourism. So you just would not go there.
But there's also the money that's to be made through the weaponization of the internet in America.
I mean, that's my problem. I think when I started writing this book, I have to be honest, I was slightly dismissive of people that believed in conspiracy theories. I did think they were a bit thick and a bit gullible. Having done the book, I'm a lot more sympathetic towards people that fall down those rabbit holes. And I think the main reason is because of the internet. I set up a fake Instagram page for someone and basically pretended to be a conspiracist and followed the usual suspects, David Icke, Lawrence Fox, the usual. And within seconds, the algorithm spots that you are interested in these things and starts firing this stuff in. So my fake Instagram page and my real Instagram page literally live in two completely different universes. So I can see how people go down that rabbit hole. So my problem with conspiracies is not, I think you should absolutely be that terrible word, the critical thinker. You should definitely not believe everything you're told. It's absolutely clear that governments and corporations have behaved badly. But the problem with the whole conspiracist mindset is that they become people that think that everyone is lying all the time and there's no such thing as good people. And I'm inherently quite optimistic and think there are good people around. So the people I really dislike are not the people that have fallen down rabbit holes and start believing conspiracy theories, because I think they've been duped. The people I hate are the grifters, the people that actually don't believe in this nonsense, but nevertheless are selling DVDs, books, hello, I'm one of them, pills to make your turbo brain and stuff. So it's the grifters, and those people have done a lot of damage to vulnerable people, I think.
And you weren't shy in the book about going after some rather high-profile ones as well.
Well, I'm obsessed with Alex Jones. I don't know if you know who Alex Jones is, but Alex Jones was he's the big barrel-chested Texan that was on InfoWars. He was the man that once famously felt that the fluoride in American tap water was turning frogs gay. That was a massive problem for him. But also, he's much more... InfoWars at its height was absolutely massive. Donald Trump was giving interviews to it. And yet this is a man and an organization that were claiming that the school shootings in America that are so prevalent were fake, and that the parents of school shooters were lying, and that their kids weren't dead. And that's caused so much hassle that people now persecute. Can you imagine? There's nothing worse than your child being killed in a school shooting. But then to have these evil people harass you online and tell you you're lying and force you. I mean, that just made me so angry. And this guy made me so angry. And I was going, the end of my road trip, I went to Austin, Texas, and he lives in Austin, Texas. So I thought, I'm going to try and do a Louis Theroux. I'm going to try and find Alex Jones. And I was terrible at it. I kept going to places where he hadn't been for 4 years, and someone would give me a note and I'd move on. And after about 4 days, finally someone on Twitter just gave me his address, which was a lot easier. And so, so I drove to his address, which turned out to be, surprise, surprise, an incredibly wealthy, gated community, because he's making a lot of money. And the rumor was that he lives in a house which is not owned by him or owned by anyone, so that when he gets sued, he doesn't have to give it away. Anyway, we got to the gates of this gated community. I couldn't get in. I rang the bell, and I thought, well, that's it. And suddenly the gates opened, so I thought, okay, I'll just drive in. So I drove in, got to his house, walked up to the front door, and I was like, right, this is it. And I thought, I don't really know what I'm going to ask him, but I rang the bell, and a man answered, and I said, I'm from London. I'd like to speak to Alex Jones. And he said, F off. And I went, and then in the background, I saw Alex Jones, and I was about to ask a question, and the gentleman at the door produced a handgun. Yeah. And at that stage, I went, sorry, and just ran away, got in my car, and drove off. I'm just not very good in America being a sort of investigative reporter, because they can shoot you. I think they could have claimed that I was aggressing their house. So I didn't really get much further with Alex Jones. But it was interesting, the amount of people that he'd worked with in various buildings were all terrified of giving any information on him, because they're all terrified of being trolled by his supporters.
Do you think the court case has effectively done for him, or
I don't
do you
know.
think he's got a life beyond that? Because obviously the amount of money he was sued for was astronomical.
Yes, so he was sued, I think, by survivors, by parents of the school shooting stuff, and I think he was ordered to pay something like $1 billion, something he'll never pay.
But this was based on the amount of money they thought he was making from the internet.
InfoWars did make that amount of money, and so I assumed that although he probably wouldn't pay it back, that would be the end of it. But in a funny sense, I think a bit like Trump, these people thrive on being attacked. So what we would see as someone doing something decent and trying to stop someone spreading lies that are really hurting people, they see it as affirmation to their followers that they are trying to shut you up, or trying to sort of close you down. So I don't know. I think he's probably even more of a cult figure now. And if Trump gets back in, which unfortunately I think he probably will, then someone like Alex Jones will rise again.
Do you think Trump has gained more than he's lost by hitching his cart to some of these people? Or do you think it's so damaging that actually, if you think about it, would a mainstream, if you weren't embracing these theories and you were a mainstream Republican with a big base of support, surely that would be easier to get past a candidate like Biden. Why do you think he insists on, is it just that this particular area of America is so invested in these theories?
It's so odd that, because, I mean, really, there are no rules. The one thing about Trump is he breaks every known rule. There's everything about him shouldn't work. This is a man who supposedly is there to fight the elites. You are the bloody elite. This is, you know, I mean, it's just incredible. But there's something about, again, it comes down to, it's very similar to that reason why Americans like conspiracies. There's that feeling that somewhere there is conspiracy theory, the definition of a conspiracy theory is that there's a sort of hidden hand guiding and controlling, and often it's an anti-Semitic hidden hand, is guiding, controlling world affairs. And America is two countries. America is a circle all around the coast with all the towns, cities that we've probably all been to that we love. New Orleans and, well, actually not New Orleans, but, like New York and LA and San Francisco and Chicago. And you go there and you think, who the hell is voting for Trump? Who's believing these conspiracies? These are people like us. They're kind of civilized and they think about good things. And then you go into what are known as the flyover states, which most people don't go to. And that is the vast amount of America. And that is a completely different country. And there, they don't trust elites. They don't trust people from the big cities. And somehow Trump has tapped into that.
Do you think it's inherently a right-wing rather than left-wing thing, or is it just that we're more exposed to the right-wing side?
As in conspiracies? No, it's very interesting that. So right-wing conspiracies definitely, right-wingers definitely rule the kind of conspiracy world in America. But I would say there's a very strong, I think it's that, I can't remember what the political term is, but there is a term when you go so far left or so far right that you actually end up meeting again. And it's extremists. Extremism thrive on conspiracies because it's about making you feel, I mean, the reason conspiracy theories work, the reason people are attracted to them is as humans, we essentially like order. We like things to be quite straight and normal. And the one thing I've learned from traveling doing this book is, excuse my French, but shit happens. Yeah. Life is chaos. It's chaotic. And people don't like that. And conspiracy theories give you answers. They give a little bit of order. If you're feeling dispossessed, if you're feeling hard done by in economic times and stuff, and you think it's your fault, you go, it's not. There's a reason. There's someone doing it. And it also gives you a slight feeling that you've got a sort of secret knowledge. So I totally understand the attraction of conspiracies. But I just think it's so damaging with the rise of things like AI and deep fakes coming. It's just going to get worse and worse. And you're already seeing in the American election this time, the very first sort of fake phone calls from fake voices pretending to be Biden. I mean, that's just early on. Soon you're going to be able to not know what to believe.
Well, the technology, I mean, I work for a radio company at the moment, and the technology around AI and replicating voices is truly petrifying. So I think about a year ago, if you wanted to create a sentence using a famous person's voice, you would need to feed in a full range of their vowel sounds so that you could effectively recreate this on the computer. Now, and someone I work with has done this. We were going to do a promo with a well-known presenter, and he said, my editor said, oh, I know what I want him to say. Oh, and I've done an AI version. I said, you must never let anyone know that, because it did sound, I thought it sounded just like them, although I played it to a friend of mine who said it sounds nothing like them. So I think there's still some way to go.
It's basically Chat GPT for radio, isn't it? And that will come soon. None of us will be here. I'll be animated.
But it was extraordinary how, in a year, the changes...
Yes, I agree, totally.
The changes come on. When you've gone around, what strikes me about the book is it's a fun book. And obviously there's some truly scary stuff out there, but it's not, I wouldn't call it a depressing read. I would call it
it's not.
It's a fun, entertaining, illuminating
I hope so.
read.
When we're talking about this now, because it does make me angry, the people taking advantage of people, and that's a part of the book, a part of conspiracies. But no, all my travel books have been about I'm really obsessed. I grew up in Lebanon, in a country which most people would think, oh, that's must be an awful place to grow up in. It wasn't. It's the most beautiful, incredible country, and I knew that. So I was always interested in destinations that sound very, that probably you wouldn't go to, but then when you get there, you realize they're completely different. And as an example, growing up in Lebanon, our rival for the headlines was Cambodia and Pol Pot and the killing fields. And Cambodia is exactly the same, a place you go to, and it is so stunningly beautiful and so interesting, and yet has this appalling hidden past. And one of the things I love about traveling and writing books about is I used to wonder why I go to these places. As an example, I went on the centenary of Archduke Franz Ferdinand being shot in Sarajevo. I went on the centenary, and I remember as a kid I was fascinated by this guy being assassinated, and then that started the First World War. And to get to the actual corner, in this book I go to where JFK is shot. It's the same thing. You think, what am I doing here? Like, it's 100 years after this guy was shot. What am I doing on this corner? I really do feel there's some sort of weird osmosis you get when you're in a place where something extraordinary has happened. I don't know, it's a way of almost touching history. And maybe it's just me. I really get off on that. I really like it. So my books, I think travel is inherently funny, and I think people are funny, and just me traveling is funny because I'm always getting in trouble. But I'm also looking and interested in quite serious things. So I think what people get from my books normally, I hope, is they go, I kind of laughed all the way through, but then I realized I'd learned a lot, which always terrifies me. I don't want anyone to feel they've learned anything from me. But I think there are facts in them.
Well, sort of touching on that, do you think in some cases conspiracies can be useful as a way to sort of shine a light on our lazy assumptions? Are there times when you've ended up reevaluating your own beliefs because you've come into contact with someone who you thought, or definitely was, a conspiracist, but you thought there's edges to that where we can come together and...
Yeah, it's one of the problems with laughing at conspiracy theories is what we're really saying is don't question anything, don't be conspiracy theorists have kind of hijacked that term, critical thinking, because we should all be critical thinkers. We should all do our own research, but to an extent, you've also got to trust experts. You've got to trust people that are, experts in their own field for a reason. So I think you need to know your limits. So for instance, I can't argue with someone, I don't care if you don't want to take the vaccine, that's up to you, but don't tell vulnerable people that could benefit from the vaccine to take it, not to take it. And so I don't want to argue with someone about that, but I will listen to someone who's an immunologist or, someone who's, and that's the problem. I think people don't. So when I was doing the book, were there any conspiracy theories that I assumed were rubbish and then thought maybe had a little bit more to them? I think almost all conspiracy theories have a kernel of truth. I think one of the things I really noticed was that a lot of, there is some weird law on the internet, which I can't remember the name of it, but however ridiculous a thing you write on the internet, 10% of people reading it will believe it as fact. And that, in a sense, is how conspiracy theories start. The Finland does not exist. I think originally it was a Reddit subthread, and 10% of the people reading it took it serious, and off it went. If you're asking me about what conspiracy theories I think have more than a kernel of truth, I think UFOs, it's interesting. There are so many quite, I'd say, straight-up people, as in commercial airline pilots, military people, who've actually got footage of weird things, and mass amounts of people seeing lights in the sky, and the fact that the New York Times did this expose that the Pentagon had I think there's something in it. Whether they're actually little green men, I've no idea. The weirdest thing, the conspiracy I think actually is probably the most truth, is actually, the reason I didn't believe it was because of Trump, and it is COVID. The idea that COVID supposedly started in a wet market from a bat or whatever, 600 meters from a laboratory which happens to specialize in all coronaviruses in China, is just so coincidental. Of course it didn't. I think it's clear to me that COVID was some sort of accidental lab leak. It's not unthinkable that the Chinese government would then be slightly nervous about that and try and hush it up. But the problem was, I think we would have all believed that, but then the moment someone like Donald Trump starts calling it Kung Flu and turning it into a sort of race issue against China, it's what happens to all of us. We're polarized. You think, I'm somewhere in the middle, but if Trump's saying that, I'm not listening to him, and you go to the other side. And I think that's the problem with a lot of our life at the moment, is we are polarized by social media and by what gets clicks. Because being in the middle, having nuance, saying I agree with a little bit of that, a little bit of that, no one's interested.
Yeah. Now the book is a fabulous evocation of amazing places, but you don't have to go. I think what you've shown in the book as well is you don't have to go too far from home. And some of the most entertaining and interesting parts of the book for me were were much closer, on our doorsteps, in fact.
I mean, I am, you know, I'll be honest with you, I write my travel books because I like traveling.
Yeah.
And so I don't like doing stuff in England because I just think, no, it's not exciting. You're never a tourist in your own country. But I did read about this guy. He's the heir to the Mappin and Webb jewelry family, and he owns quite a sort of ugly, stately home type hotel, which is called Camelot Castle, and it's just above Tintagel in Cornwall, where King Arthur's seat supposedly was. And he came into my sort of focus when one New Year's Eve he flew the QAnon flag. I mean, QAnon really are batshit, and he flew the QAnon flag from his hotel's flag post, and he also was offering 50% off to anyone staying in his hotels unvaccinated. And he ran his own website called, I can't remember what it's called, Camelot News or something, in which he would just have on the most crazy people. So I thought, well, this is a sort of, it's almost like a little all conspiracies in one, and it's only 2 hours drive from where I live. So I went down and spent a weekend in this hotel. And I have to say, it was one of the weirdest. I won't ruin it. It is in the book, but it was one of the weirdest weekends I've ever spent.
Conspiracy theorist for the time pressed.
Yeah, it's a city break.
Now you had some great conversations in Camelot. As I say, it's a brilliant part of the book, so I won't give it all away. But who of the people that you interviewed, encountered, did you find the most infuriating or hardest to debate with?
Well, I mean, the people that just come at you with statistics and. I mean, you know, which sounds like it's exactly statistics, and they've got reports, and here's a doctor, and you go, but I don't know if that's a real. I could find you a doctor that would say anything. I don't know, because and the point about this is I'm not a specialist in this. It's called the conspiracy tourist, because I'm a tourist. I was going into this world and having a look around at it and trying to use common sense with it. I have to say, I find flat earthers quite difficult to talk to, because there's just a part of you saying, look, we could just solve this now. We could just get in. I mean, I own a hot air balloon. We could just get in my hot air balloon. We can go up and we can see the curvature of the Earth, but no. And what they never talk about is, you know, I mean, there's so many things. I took the flat Earth, I don't know if you know flat Earth theory. Obviously, you know about flat Earth theory. It's just a round disc. Australians are holograms, so you Finns are not alone. Australians don't exist either. There's an ice wall or waterfall around it. It's very Truman Show-like. But then there's a splinter group who are square flat earthers, and they believe the Earth is flat and square, which in that case means the Earth has 4 corners. And those 4 corners of the square flat Earth are the island of Hydra in Greece, Papua New Guinea, the Bermuda Triangle, and an island called Fogo in Newfoundland. And so I went to Newfoundland. I found a square flat earther, I think the only square flat earther in Newfoundland, and then we did a road trip all the way to the island of Fogo, which Fogo is quite an astonishing place, I have to say, for many reasons. I mean, Newfoundland's remote, but they find Fogans remoter, so it's even better. And so I took him there, and it all ended very badly. You have to climb this cliff called Brimstone Head, and supposedly you can see the drop. But I don't think this will be any spoilers. There was no drop. And he didn't take it well at all. And then he insisted that we rent a fisherman's boat. And then when the fisherman told him there was no edge of the Earth, he claimed the fisherman was working for Bill Gates, and it all went very nasty. And I just was thinking, why am I not filming this? But it's all in the book, and it's fantastic.
It's absolutely brilliant, yeah. So time for some questions in a minute. So if you do have a question, put your hand up. There'll be a microphone coming round. This is a travel show. I wanted to ask, you go to some brilliant places. Conspiracies aside for a minute, while we get up for another chat about conspiracies, where is the best place you went to for this book? Where really sort of caught your heart?
Well, I mean, I'm such a sucker for America because I love a road trip. And I've done all the road trips up, you know, the Atlantic, the Pacific, across the South. But I'd never sort of done the middle. And that drive across New Mexico particularly, I found New Mexico absolutely incredible. Santa Fe, Albuquerque, I went on the Breaking Bad tour, loved it. There's I don't know who's seen Breaking Bad here, but Walter White's house has been bought by a woman who very much does not appreciate that people come every day to look at Walter White's house. And so she's painted it a different color. She's put fences up. there's a large size. At one stage, she used to sit on a rocking chair with a shotgun, saying she'd shoot anyone that turned up. But it's sort of fair enough, because there's a scene in Breaking Bad where, and it happened by accident, but Walter White does this, and a pizza flies out of a box and lands on the roof of his house. And so tourists were turning up and flinging pizzas onto this person's house. So Albuquerque was really nice. And then I went to Los Alamos, which is fantastically interesting, especially this was just before Oppenheimer came out, and that was an incredible place to go. And then Roswell. So New Mexico was really, really special for me, actually.
And where did you think the greatest concentration was in America? Where did you feel like you were really down the rabbit hole, seeing and encountering it most? Where did it come most easily in terms of finding?
I think Roswell, because Roswell's a kind of magnet for, I'm sorry to use the word nutters, but it's a brief for alternative thinkers. It just attracts anyone that has an interest in anything. From New Age, I mean, actually, that's another thing I learned. There is a very odd combination. There's a merging between New Age types and conspiracists. So what I'm saying is, if there's anyone in your family or friends that are starting to get interested in crystals, for instance, that's an early red flag. It's a sort of gateway drug into much worse stuff. But I think anyone with an interest in oddness goes to places like Roswell. But almost everyone I met there were very sweet.
Yeah.
Like they weren't, it's only the ones that are so obsessed they're quite aggressive, or they're trying to tell, if someone wants to believe in UFOs, that's great. I mean, why not? I love to think that science doesn't know everything. So it was quite fun. I mean, you certainly never have a boring conversation in Roswell.
And two of the people in the book that really hit home for me were the two guys who had a bit of a hard time, really. They'd been attacked, and you went to stay with them because they were trying to sort of sluice out some conspiracies.
Who's that?
The two guys whose house you stayed in America.
Oh, in Austin.
Exactly.
Well,
yes.
yes. Well, they were interesting because they weren't actually conspiracy theorists.
Exactly.
I stayed with this guy called Gavin, who he does this thing on YouTube called the Slow-Mo Guys. I don't know if you know them, but they have 15 million subscribers. And the whole reason he did what he did was because as a kid he watched Trigger Happy TV. And so we became friends online, and then he lived in Austin, Texas. And I'd always wanted to go to Austin, Texas. And he said, well, if you're ever in Austin, come and stay. Of course, we all say that, never expect it. Literally, I was like, I'm coming. Yeah. And I thought, this poor guy, he's going to be, he's a YouTuber. Will he have enough room for me? God almighty, I turn up there, he's got a gull-wing Tesla, a Jaguar E-Type. He's got 2 houses, and I thought, I'm in the wrong business here. I need to be in YouTube. But he told me this incredible story about how in the house he lived in before, he'd set up cameras in the house because he's very like that. And one night they were fast asleep, and his wife or partner is a famous YouTuber, and they woke up, and there was a car just sitting in their driveway with the lights on, and he thought it was a bit odd. And then suddenly a guy gets out the car, walks up to the door, blows the lock off with a gun, and walks in. And they're in their bedroom, so they quickly run into the cupboard, hide. But Gavin, being technical, he's watching on his phone this guy just walk around their house with a gun, going into every room, finally comes into their bedroom, but they're hiding. And after a bit, he thinks they're not home, so he sits on their sofa for a bit, walks outside, gets in the car, and meanwhile, they've called the police. And as he's about to leave, the police turn up, he shoots at the police shoot him dead. And this all happened within his sort of second month of being in America. And then Gavin was taken aside by the police while they were waiting to interview him. So he just edited the whole thing together. And it's the creepiest thing I've ever seen. And it made you really, and the reason, of course, this guy had done it was because he'd seen something on YouTube. He'd decided that he wants to murder Gavin and marry his girlfriend. I mean, it was this kind of delusional stuff that happens online. He'd driven 12 hours to find their house and do this to them. So yeah, it's sort of terrifying but weirdly gripping at the same time.
Well, I think that kind of sums up the book, really.
Yeah.
I think that's what you do so brilliantly. It's not, I think, a lot of conspiracy theory journalism. You come out of it thinking your head's about to explode and where are we all heading. That's probably still the case, but but you do it with humour, you do it with warmth, and you meet some amazing people.
Yeah, I certainly meet some amazing people.
And you're going to be using the book as the basis of a
I am.
tour.
So I'm touring it. I do this, on my tours, I do a thing I call Extreme PowerPoint, where I basically use photos and video that I've taken when I'm making the book, and I'll talk you through the places I've been and the stuff in the book. But because obviously it's a very controversial subject, I've invited one of Britain's leading conspiracists to tour with me. He's called Dr. Julian Northcote. He wrote a very famous book called Cows, Britain's Secret Killers, in which he believes up to 17,000 ramblers a year are murdered by cows, and that's all been hidden by Big Pharma.
Very well
Big
hidden.
Pharma, yeah. So he's an interesting character.
A big farmer or Big Pharma?
It was the Big Pharma, yeah. So we've never met, actually. So we've never been in the same room together, but that's going to be really interesting touring with him. So it should be quite tricky.
Fantastic. Any questions from the audience at this stage? I think we've got a few hands up. Gentleman sitting very well placed at the front.
It's wonderful. Lovely listening to you.
Thank you.
Just in terms of making money, which conspiracy theories have made the most money in your experience?
That's really interesting. I think it's less conspiracy theory on its own. I think it's more media. So things like InfoWars, like sites that basically promote conspiracy theories, but they make their money from subscribers, but also by selling. There's a lot of, I mean, we got rid of that term snake oil a long time ago because we all knew what snake oil merchants were. And a lot of conspiracy theorists, once they get to a certain level of popularity, then use that to sell almost always just completely whack job. I mean, you know, COVID, there were loads of different varieties of COVID cures that were nonsense, and that was being sold. So, yeah, I think you need to set up a website. It's a YouTube channel. And so any YouTube channel, once you've got the subscribers, you're making a lot of money. InfoWars made an insane amount of money, and we'll never see it again.
I saw some more hands up. Gentleman again at the front.
Dom, I'm halfway through your book.
Oh, thank you.
Which I'm enjoying very much. I'm at the point where you're talking about Camelot.
Yeah.
And I've been to the Camelot. I haven't stayed there. I mean, it looks an awful hotel.
It is. Sorry, but it is.
Total naffness.
Yeah.
But can you describe what I did find interesting about that was the fact they were trying to sell you pictures.
Yes, well, that's what I love about doing books like this, that I went to Camelot Castle for the conspiracies, but actually the most interesting thing was this. When I arrived, there was some of the most appalling art I've ever seen in my life, everywhere in the hotel, all clearly done by the same artist. And there were signs everywhere saying, "Have you met Ted?" And things like, "Don't forget to ask to see Ted's light box." And I was thinking, is this a euphemism? I don't know what this means or who Ted is. And it turns out that Ted is this artist that lives almost like a captive. He's not a captive, in the basement of Camelot Castle. And he sort of pops out occasionally and smokes a cheroot and puts another terrible painting on the wall. And for some reason, the owners of Camelot Castle think he's God's gift. So they almost are kind of his patrons. And there are books everywhere showing Ted exhibiting in Venice, of all places and stuff. And then the best thing you could do if you really want to read about Camelot Castle is go to TripAdvisor, which is not something I'd ever do normally, and just check out the one-star reviews of Camelot Castle, because the stories in there are quite incredible. And it seems to me, allegedly, that there's a bit of a, you know, people do go and see Ted's light box in the basement, and there's quite a hard sell goes on. There are a lot of pictures of slightly startled people coming out, having paid some money for really a very ugly piece of art. I have to say, in Ted's defense, I don't know if he knew who I was or what I was doing, but I did go and see his light box, and he gave me, there was no hard selling at all, he gave me a piece of art. So I don't know if that was him trying to I'd stall my attack. I don't know. So I certainly saw no hard selling. But the whole place is very, very odd. I think it is worth staying there for a night. You can't. To me, it's a bit like traveling. I don't think you can count. You know, if you can't say you've been to a country when you just land in the plane and take off. My rule is you have to have spent a night. So I think, you know, I wouldn't force you to go there, but it's worth it.
There we go. It's a good advert. Young lady down here.
So at what point would you consider something a conspiracy theory rather than just something with backed up evidence?
That is a great point.
Question.
Because there are a lot of things that people talk about as conspiracies that aren't conspiracies. Like as humans, we're naturally conspiratorial. We're all, you know, sitting there chatting about stuff and planning things. And governments, for instance, there's arguments about if a government is hiding some military secret, is that a conspiracy or is that them just doing something for national security? I think when it becomes a conspiracy, the definition of a conspiracy theory is that there are secret hands. There's a secret organization behind the scenes controlling things. And it's also that belief that everything is done I mean, let's face it, a lot of things are done for profit, and people do bad things. But I don't think, I meet so many people that aren't doing things for profit and are doing things for the right reasons. And I think that's the worst part of conspiracy mindedness, is that it just makes you think that everyone is bad. And they're not. Most people are good, I think. And I think that's its worst aspect.
Question, gentleman in the second row.
Hi there, Dom. Been to Dealey Plaza a couple of times. It's pretty something.
You've been where?
Dealey Plaza, beg your pardon.
Okay, yeah.
Dallas, and they've done the sixth floor museum, and they used to have a little conspiracy museum fairly close by. I know they're still not fully releasing information that they possibly could release due to possible national security in America. Is it still a conspiracy?
Which
Even
one?
now,
Sorry.
JFK, beg your pardon.
Oh, okay,
JFK.
so the JFK
Yeah,
one. Sorry, yes. So JFK is really interesting because that JFK kind of invented the conspiracy term in a sense. You know, supposedly conspiracy theory was set up, conspiracy theorists will tell you, was set up by the CIA to kind of almost muddle real news and sort of pretend that it gets so many layers of deception, can't quite follow it. But what's interesting about the JFK thing, I think, personally, having been there, I still do think it was a single shooter. I think one of the things we can't accept as humans is that great people or important figures can be kind of stopped or killed by very ordinary people. And you kind of want grander schemes and stuff. And I've heard every theory about JFK, that it was the Cubans, it was the Russians, the mafia, the Muppets, suicide. The Onion very said they thought it was suicide. It was a joke. But I don't know. Yes, it is. It's so interesting. And the reason I think JFK became such a conspiracy, apart from anything else, I didn't know this, but the footage of JFK, the famous Zapruder footage that we've all seen, no one in America saw that until about 1975. I thought they saw it straight away. Life magazine bought the film, put a couple of images, but the actual full film was, someone had taken a copy. When it was taken to be copied by Life magazine, whoever took that film made his own personal copy. And that eventually ended up on a late-night talk show in America in about 1975. I don't know if you know more about this than I do. And that was the first time that all of America saw what has to be the most shocking footage of his head exploding. And I think that was very much a moment where the fact that that had been hidden for ages, that started a lot of conspiracies going. And I think also just because it was the first time that anyone had really seen something. They'd seen something so momentous, in the same way that 9/11 was such a momentous moment, and you could see it, and then everyone starts to, once you've seen that footage so many times, you start to overanalyze and look at it. I'll tell you the most interesting fact I learned. I've done so many visits to JFK, because I do find it fascinating. The weird thing about when you visit the JFK assassination site is because it's such a massive moment in American history and world history, you assume that the whole place, which is called Dealey Plaza, is just going to be some sort of national monument. And it's not. It's a busy street going through the middle of Dallas. But rather helpfully, people have gone onto the road to the place where Kennedy's, the shot that blew his head off, hit them, and they've drawn a large X actually on the road. So you've got dark tourists kind of running out, getting their photo, and coming back. The most interesting fact I learned on this last trip was one of the reasons Kennedy died was because he very famously had terrible back problems. He had very bad, very ill health, and he was actually wearing a kind of brace which allowed him to sort of stand up and not bend over because he had such a bad back. So when he was sitting in the car, when he was hit the first time there, a normal person would go down, but he was unable to dip down because of the brace he was wearing. I'd never heard that fact before. I thought that was really interesting.
Now, one thing that comes, very briefly, before we finish, one thing that comes through in the book to me is you say over and over again, it's almost impossible to debate with a hardcore conspiracist just by throwing facts back at them.
Yeah.
What role do you think humour has to play in terms of being able to burst these bubbles?
Well, it's very difficult, because the one thing I learned about conspiracists is, and I was told this, I met a couple of people that had helped deprogram conspiracists, because honestly, you know, if you've got a small interest in conspiracy theories, that's great. But some people are so far down the rabbit hole, it is a bit like being in a cult. And the way people get out of conspiracy theory thinking is the same way that they get out of cults. You can't do it yourself. If you attack them or you ridicule them, they tend to sort of retreat into their bunker, and it's not helpful. So me as a comedian, I think people assume that I've written a book just taking a piss out of them, and I'm really not.
No.
I think you have to highlight just sometimes how just totally weird some of this stuff is. But yeah, there's no point laughing at them, but I think you can help everyone laugh at the absurdity of some of the situations we get to.
And you certainly will. If you read the book, you will laugh at the absurdity. You will learn a lot. It's an absolutely brilliant read. Dom will be signing copies pretty much in a minute's time over there. At this point, we've probably run out of time, so I want to say thank you very much, Dom.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely brilliant. Fantastic book. Thanks very much for coming, guys.
Thank you very much.